fellow doctors. Today we are going to be talking about moving on from giving advice for free to giving advice where you're actually paid and valued for it. But before I start, I just want to thank you for listening to this podcast, especially if you've been listening for some time. And I know that people have, plus following Medic Footprints for 10 years plus. I know a lot of doctors have. And if you have and you haven't subscribed, please don't forget to do that now. So I'm really grounded. I'm feeling really grounded at the moment. I've just come back from a week's no contact retreat, right? And it happened to be just 20 minutes away. I'm in Kent. But I got to hand in my phone for a week. It was incredible. And I spent the week with 22 people I did not know and focused solely on deep, emotional, personal development work that would help me grow further as a doctor, a leader, and an entrepreneur. It was incredible. The food was awesome, but most importantly, I now have the tools to no longer lose my shit, so to speak. And I have the language of emotions, and it actually made me reflect that as doctors, in particular as professionals, we rely heavily on our intellect. Right? So that's our thinking brain, right? We rely heavily on that to get us through life, right? But there is a limitation to that. And one of the things I realized is that my intellect was just tired. It was burnt out. And I think that is what we experience when we are burnt out. And so my intellect took a holiday in that period of time, and that it made way for the rest of me, my emotional self, my spiritual self. There were so many other parts of me that I didn't realize existed because I'd been 100% relying on my intellect. So I am bringing the new Abeyna 2.0 to this podcast and to everything that I do. So let me know what you think. But moving forward, we've got a really exciting few months with the opening up of our Doctors in Industry Fellowship. Specifically, we're upping our game, as I always do every few months. So we are really aiming this specifically at doctors who want to position themselves as non-clinical experts and leaders in industry. So it's not just a matter of you wanting to move to industry. It's really recognizing your value. And the reality is you have value. I was speaking at a conference in Belfast. It was an occupational medicine conference on leadership. That was at the Titanic. Titanic, an amazing place, by the way, amazing museum, amazing venue, amazing hotel. Go there. So I was speaking on leadership, and you've got a bunch of doctors in the room, like probably about 40 doctors. And I asked, who here identifies as a leader? So hands up, who identifies as a leader? And what happened is that probably about 20% of people put their hands up, and by the end of the presentation, everyone put their hands up, right? So my real message to you as a doctor, if you're listening, is that as a doctor, one of the key elements of being a doctor that you still have that is not being eroded right now, because we see that as a clinician, that is being eroded. Our jobs are being taken up by anyone and everyone these days. One of the key things you still have that is not being eroded is being a leader. So a lot of doctors don't actually identify with that, but the reality is, like, we are leaders in our clinical work, we are leaders and we're seen as leaders. But if we don't see ourselves as leaders, that is a huge problem, regardless of whether you're doing clinical or non-clinical. So remember, being a leader is one of the top things that you need to develop if you want to future-proof your career. And so moving on to the purpose of this episode, I am really hot on non-clinical consulting as a way for doctors to develop a lucrative side hustle, right? It's actually quite easy to get started. And the easiest thing about it is you're actually already doing it, right? So I talk about paid advice and free advice. So have you ever been in a situation at work where you've been asked to do a project of any sort? That could be an audit, quality improvement, even research, even a presentation or a strategy, or you could have been asked to do that outside of work. That could have been writing something or planning an event or simply just giving an opinion on something, whether it's based on your clinical knowledge or your healthcare knowledge or just your general overall life knowledge, right? That is consulting. It's as simple as that. It's where you are being valued for your knowledge by someone else. And it usually will involve money. So if it's as part of your job, you wouldn't be paid any more for it than your usual salary, right? But we know and we see companies that will pay a lot of money for you as a doctor in a non-clinical capacity. So this is an area that is totally ripe for the picking, and not nearly enough doctors are getting into it at the moment. So as part of the Doctors in Industry Fellowship, we specifically coach and train doctors who are building up their own non-clinical consulting practice, whether it's on the side, whether it's part-time, whether it's full-time, it doesn't matter. Because the key benefits of this is that it's flexible. You pick the work that you want to do and you charge what you want to charge. So you have full control, full autonomy, and you can walk away from it. And for those of you who are looking to break into industry, so whether that's health tech, pharma, consulting, coaching, whatever it is a really easy way in and a really great way to test the waters without having to commit to a full-time job. So, hey, are you sold on this yet? Well, let's get started. So how can you get started? So I'll give you some basic tips. The first tip, and this is very specific only for doctors who are keen on growing their brand and getting paid well. I'm talking like well in industry using this strategy, right? So the first tip is you need to be very clear on where you can best add value. So clarity is everything, and my coach says money always flows to the place of clarity. And especially now when we're in a market whereby there's specialists for everything, you also need to be a specialist in your area of interest. So for example, I am a specialist in supporting and coaching doctors who are looking to develop their careers and position themselves as experts on a non-clinical capacity in industry. So the key things are they're doctors, they want to be experts, they're working in a non-clinical capacity and in industry. I could get even more niche and specific than that, but you get my drift. So on our fellowship, we have doctors who are consulting in femtech, specifically to help startups create doctor-grade products. We have a doctor who is consulting in music health tech, which is essentially a new area that he created. We have another doctor who coaches women physicians and female business owners. Again, you see my drift. The more specific, the less competition in your area. And I know we see a lot of doctors who are saying, I just want to do health tech. I just want to do consulting. It's like saying you want to do healthcare. You want to specialize in healthcare. It's not specific enough. And remember, the more specific you are, the more you can charge, because there's not enough competition to say, well, your client will go and find someone else. So the first bit is clarity. The second most important bit is the mindset. So when I started off this podcast episode, I was talking about identifying as a leader. So you need to believe and own your leadership in this process, right? Believe and own your leadership, because people will see you as a leader and they'll be attracted to you because they will believe that you know what you're talking about. And as long as you know what you're talking about, that's not a problem. But I see too many doctors who are just too humble, right? Oh no, I don't know enough about this. Oh no, I need to go and do another qualification to actually talk to anyone about this. I'm not a leader. Like, all of those things are cutting down your value in sizes, right? So in the NHS, in a traditional clinical, humility wins, but outside of industry, you cannot be humble. I'm not saying be arrogant, but humility is not going to help you stand out in what can be a very crowded, busy market where people just get distracted constantly. So you need to be very clear, you need to be very confident, and if you don't believe it, we're all very good at acting. Just own it. own it. We act in our jobs, especially if we're like feeling like it's a shitty day and we're depressed and we're sad and we still have to show up for our patients. It's exactly the same thing. So it's really important that you elevate yourself and believe in yourself. And that's why in the fellowship we focus a lot. In fact, most of the work is on mindset these days. And then it's about finding the work. So no, I haven't gone into, set up your website, set up your this, set up that. That stuff is easy, and I'm sure you can find out how to do that. That is the easiest, quickest bit of this whole process. Branding is important, but not as important of these areas that I'm really clear on. So once you're clear on the area that you really want to focus on, you have to be clear on the problem that you're solving for your audience. So the problem that I'm solving, for example, is that there are so many doctors who either are not aware that they can get into industry through non-clinical consulting, or they're struggling to get into industry because the competition is huge now for doctors looking for alternative careers, and they really want to stand out amongst the competition, plus get paid exactly what they want. They don't want to have to take a pay cut. They don't want to have to do another qualification. They don't want to have to be working full-time and more for like big consulting firms and get burnt out like they are now. These are doctors that want full autonomy over their careers and do some great work with some great people and make an impact at scale, right? So that is the problem that I'm solving for these doctors. So what problem are you solving? And again, only you will know this if you know your market and the people that you serve. And again, the more specific the problem, the better. Then the next step is finding people to work with, right? And no, you don't have to just jump on social media to do this, right? You can, and it's a good step, but I always say the first step is the people that you already know, the people that you may have worked with, your friends, your family. Those are the people that know you. Those are the people that you already have a relationship with. Because the reality is, in industry, businesses and opportunities are built on relationships. I'll remind you, if you're someone that's applying for a job, 85% of jobs are actually filled solely through networking. So if you're someone that's like solely relying on job ads, you're only applying for only 15% of the jobs. And even then you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the job would probably have gone to someone they already know, even if it was advertised, and you're missing out on 85% of that. In fact, very recently, one of our fellows just got their dream job in big pharma, right? Dream job. And technically, they applied through, as I call, the front door. So they actually applied for the job when it came up. But realistically, they were sat and interviewed by the same hiring manager they'd seen several months before. So they'd already developed a relationship, and only with the hiring manager, but other people in the company. So again, it was those relationships that really helped him to stand out beyond anyone else that applied. And persistence also wins. So going back, if you want to find clients or people to work with, always start with your warm market. So people that you already know, and even if they don't have opportunities, they will know someone that has opportunities, right? So you need to tell as many people as you can as to what you're doing, because that is how opportunities come through. You can also use platforms like LinkedIn to make sure people know what you're doing, and don't keep yourself as the world's biggest secret, right? If you want to at the start, and I know some people do this, if you want to, you could do some pro bono work just for the purposes of you getting into the swing of things, getting experience and getting testimonials, but it's absolutely not necessarily as your first opportunity, as your first consulting role. You're probably wondering, like, what other things can I do quite easily? So as you know, content is king these days, and there are many platforms and many opportunities to start getting involved consulting on a writing basis, creating videos, providing support and advice for medical search engine optimization. One of our clients was looking for a doctor that we supplied on a women's health level. That's another way of consulting. The list is absolutely endless. So the biggest challenge is finding a client, but I would say absolutely start through your friends and family, but also leverage platforms like social media and LinkedIn so that people know what you're doing. right? And keep going, stay persistent. They say there's like 100-day period whereby, you know, if you continue going, and on a regular, consistent basis, then it's inevitable that something will land, right? But it takes some time for people to remember what you're doing. And also it takes the same amount of time for people to forget what you're doing. So don't stop, don't hesitate, and keep going. The other thing is making sure that you have a really good, valuable and supportive network. So in our fellowship, we have doctors who have created opportunities for each other, right? So they haven't had to go out to market because they've already got this warm market and warm community that they're working with. And the next step is, how do you actually sell? You found a potential opportunity. How do you actually sell? Selling is something, and that is probably the biggest challenge that we see doctors face, selling themselves, right? Without going into much detail on selling, it doesn't have to be a dirty process. It's actually an organic process. And don't forget, any process, it happens over time, not overnight, right? The third step is, once you've had an agreement that you want to work together, pricing, right? So pricing is another area that, especially doctors and our relative lack of financial literacy, is something that we do stumble on, but it doesn't have to be difficult. But can you imagine you get to a point where you can literally charge what you want and cherry pick the work that you want to do? Pricing is very much an art and psychology rather than a science in itself. And again, this is something that we do work through our fellowship. And the last bit, which is actually the easiest bit, is just doing the work. And the reality is the work is the easiest and the most fun bit of it all. And it's something that all doctors do extremely well. And so the most challenging bit is really the finding of the clients and the selling element. But just deciding like where you want to focus your energy, what you love giving advice on. It doesn't need to be medical. It doesn't need to be anything related to healthcare. Just make a decision on that. It doesn't have to be right. It just has to be something that you're really excited about and that you'd love to explore, right? So that is the real kind of overview of how to get started in non-clinical consulting, and using that as a side hustle. So this is something that you can absolutely do in your own time. And I see a lot of doctors do it online in their spare time. One of our community was working on brand strategy, and you may have listened to a podcast on this recently. We've got other doctors who are consulting with charities. It is so broad. So do me a favor, have a think about, what do you love to give advice on? What do you really love to give advice on? But very specifically, what people would pay for, right? So there's no point saying, hey, I'm going to give advice on this when no one's going to pay for it, right? With any business, it needs to run on money. So hopefully you found that valuable. Just to give an overview, the first step is deciding the clarity of where you're going to focus your energy and develop your niche and where you're going to specialize. The second key step is deciding really how you're going to approach finding clients. And I always say, focus on your friends and family and your warm network first. And the third step is the selling process, the pricing. And then the fourth is just enjoying the work and doing an amazing job. And then it all starts over again by finding your next client. And if you do great work, you will get more referrals, you will get more work. And I've seen doctors who leave their clinical job entirely to do this full time. Not everyone wants to do that. And it really depends on how much time and how much you charge. So can you imagine what it would be like if you could replace your clinical income with non-clinical work? It is so much easier than you think. So I hope you really found this episode valuable as food for thought. Remember, we are opening up our Doctors in Industry Fellowship if you go to medicfootprints.org/industry very shortly. And we'll be running a non-clinical consulting workshop very soon. So stay tuned. Any questions, email us at team@medicfootprints.org. Ciao.